QuaranJazz. Listen while you're home. Hello and welcome to the 18th episode of QuaranJazz, your weekly update on what jazz musicians from all around the world are doing during social distancing time. I'm Geisa Fernandes from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And yes, I'm still at home, I'm confined, I'm in quarantine, but I realized that lots of people are already coming back to most of their activities, although under this new normal protocol. So if you are a jazz musician and would like to share your experiences of the new normal, how is it feels like going back to gigs and being on stage, drop me a line and be part of QuaranJazz. The link to both my mailing list and my website are available in the description of this episode. QuaranJazz is also a part of the Social Distancing Festival, link in the description of this episode as well. And if this is your first episode of QuaranJazz, no, really? Well, I strongly recommend you to check out our other 17 testimonials. You see that we got a pretty accurate portrait of what is being happening on the jazz scene, or let's say behind the jazz scene, in this quite peculiar year of 2020. We've been collecting a lot of experiences on both how to cope with the pandemic and also how the show did go on. Musicians had literally to reinvent the ways they could be present during a time when people needed art more than ever. The precious, respected and adored territory of the stage was simply closed. To all of you that are now going back on stage, my very best wishes. I feel so happy for you and I want to be with you as soon as possible. Meanwhile, let us check what another jazz musician is doing during this time. Well, last week we had a portrait of Brooklyn, New York, and this week we're still on the US territory, but now in Florida. I would like to welcome jazz sax player, composer, teacher, researcher, Zach Bornheimer. Thank you very much for your participation, Zach. And as usual in the show, I would like you to start by, introducing yourself and telling us about the kind of music that you do.
Hi, my name is Zach Bornheimer. I'm a jazz saxophonist and jazz composer located in Tampa, Florida. About my music a bit, before I get into me, it's kind of genre bending in intention, at least. It's all coming from a jazz origin, so I'm using kind of jazz harmonic language and jazz intentions, and then I just want to see where it kind of goes. I feel like people are a little limiting in music. Most people like most music, and as long as it's done well, at least. So I really wanted to play with that idea. So my most recent couple tunes are genre bending in that regard. So my most recent single that I put out on Spotify is called Little Fugue, and that's based around the Bach tune, the Fugue in G minor. And I just arranged that song with a more jazz harmonic language for saxophones, and then I performed all the saxophone parts. And then before that was one of my bigger tunes was The Emperor, which is based around a Dragon Ball Z character named Frieza. And it is a metal jazz tune, so it brings in influences from Animals as Leaders and in particular. And one of my friends who's on it, LaRue Nicholson, his music is very much being an electric guitar player in a lot of ways. He knows the breadth of that metal music and was really hipping me to it. So so my music is kind of hopefully a little bit genre bending, but still listenable and melody driven at the core. That's really my goal. I really want something to be memorable, or at least the vibe memorable, at least. Yeah. About me a little bit. I grew up in South Florida, near Boca Raton area, a little outside of there. My claim to fame is I went to school with Ariana Grande. Through there, that school I went to, North Broward Prep School, I was there luckily on a music scholarship, which was fantastic. I got to really be there in what I call the Renaissance period of that school. We had when I first switched to saxophone from flute, because I started out as a flute player in 6th grade, and I switched in 7th grade, I took a lesson from a local saxophonist who then later became the director of the jazz ensembles and the jazz program at at my old high school, and he started opening it up with jazz combos and a jazz arranging class, and there weren't that many students at the time who were really super interested in some of that stuff, but I definitely was. The jazz combo program definitely grew a lot, and I got used to recording thanks to that. We did an album every year, which was really fun, of the music we were working on. So we had the experience of going into a studio. It wasn't a real studio insofar as it was like everything was nailed down, but it was like the band room closet that was commandeered, and they put up like, They put up like curtains and soundproofing foam, and they adjusted tables so we had a little niche to stand in, and we'd each be in isolation, little ISO booths. So that really helped me grow, and the curriculum we used in the jazz arranging class was the University of Miami Professor Gary Lindsay's book. I forgot the name of that. I think it's the Jazz Arranger. A lot of the jazz arranging books have similar titles. But yeah, that book was absolutely fantastic, and I learned a lot and really enjoyed writing. It's similar to like a puzzle. You make one choice, and then there's a consequence to that choice, and you get to figure out the implications of that choice and how to make things flow and still get your art out while also having a logic experiment, which is kind of fun. And the other really nice thing about writing over playing really is there's an end. When you're done with a song. As opposed with saxophone, it's one of those never-ending battles, and it's really kind of interesting in that regard. So by all of my exposure there, I really wanted to go to a place with good writing and good playing, and I had some other things going on at the same time. So I had a background in programming and technology that I wanted to pursue at the same time. So I decided on University of South Florida for my undergrad, and then I later transitioned to basically like a jazz studies focus while I was there. And I got to study with Ralph Bowen, who was almost like an artist in residence at the time, which was amazing. And also then privately, I took a few lessons from Rick Margitza after Maria Schneider came in as a guest artist, and I played one of the songs that he was featured on. So I reached out to him afterwards. I saw he was posting about giving some lessons. I reached out, and that was the song we started with. So I took a few lessons there. And then while I was at USF, I studied conducting, clarinet, flute, saxophone with two different people, piano, music business. So I really tried to take advantage of everything that school had to offer. And then when it was time for me to graduate, my last year, I decided I was going to write a suite called the Emotional Suite. And that was a seven-part suite based around an individual emotion and poetry in Japanese forms. So once I did that, I asked the comp professor, Chuck Owen, for help. I asked him for lessons while I was writing, and he said, okay, but I don't really have time for lessons right now, but you can jump in on the actual graduate jazz comp stuff that we're doing, the master classes and the classes like that. So I ended up doing that, and I ended up staying for my master's in jazz composition at USF, and I got to study with Chuck for 3 years. At the same time, he founded with some of his colleagues the International Society of Jazz Arrangers and Composers, ISJAC, and I got to be helpful in those regards. And at the end of my graduate degree, I started doing copy work for Maria Schneider as we maintained a relationship from my undergrad. And now I'm working more in the production vein in some aspects while writing new music. I actually just got a new upright piano to help me write new music. But I've been most recently writing music for quintet, and I've been really enjoying it, even though I have some big band stuff coming down the pike soon as well.
Well, it sounds very promising. And, well, Zach, you are based in Tampa. What can you tell us about the Tampa jazz scene? And also, I'd like you to tell us about the projects you've been involved in.
I'm basically kind of just doing my own thing. I'm working with the Zachary Bornheimer Quintet. I was, at the time, prepping some new big band music. So that was the Zachary Bornheimer Jazz Orchestra, which nobody should be able to find any stuff on if I had my say as of yet. And then I was teaching at Eckerd College when everything kind of started. I was teaching there 2 days a week, and during spring break, obviously, everything started going a little bit crazy. But yeah, most of my gigs were already a little bit rough at the time. I remember I had one week-long gig lined up that I was in the middle of rehearsing with. That's a gig for a local organization, and I've done that gig several times. They've had some pretty crazy guest artists. So through that gig, I was able to play and have a couple gigs with Chick Corea, Hassam Ramzi, and some other really great artists in the jazz world, and a little bit outside of jazz too. The Phantom of the Opera, he was a singer we did a song of his. So there was some really cool stuff happening there, and they were taking every precaution that you could imagine I remember it was at Ruth Eckerd Hall in Clearwater, Florida, which is, I think, a 2,000-seat auditorium. We were sound checking, and, there's probably 100 people there, every single one of them wearing masks. They were cleaning down with steam cleaning every seat. They were wiping down walls. They had some money behind this particular concert, and they were going to be telecasting it across the world too. And that gig got canceled at the last. Fortunately, they still were able to pay all the staff and musicians. As far as I know, all the musicians got paid, which is absolutely great. And we were told that everybody was getting paid, and that we'll hopefully be able to do the concert later in the year. And then I had a couple Brazilian gigs lined up. Oddly enough, I play a lot of Brazilian music. I really appreciate the melodicism and the harmonic interest of Brazilian music. And I'm fortunate enough to get called to play it from time to time. So I had a gig lined up that got canceled, but interestingly enough, I didn't have very many gigs lined up for the summer because in Tampa it gets so hot that really everything dries up in the first place. Our busy season was really October through January, February. And I think, I'm not sure if that's everywhere else. I think it probably is. But yeah, the summer gets just so hot. Nobody's really working. It's crazy. So we all, basically in the summer anyway, we pivot to some other things. So I guess the summer hit maybe a month and a half, 2 months, a little early. So yeah, wedding gigs dried up. I do a couple of those here and there. And corporate gigs, same thing, as a sideman. And then, it's just a lot of, I'd say, really, I didn't lose that much work. But at the same time, the couple gigs I would get here and there, because usually during the summer people start doing their art projects, and I'm really known as being one of the guys to call for an art project. The art projects just aren't really happening right now. Nobody has, the money, because most people have day gigs in some sort, right? So at least in Tampa, being able to bring in that extra income is really helpful, because then you get to really pay musicians what you feel they're able to bring to the table, so you can pay better money for better musicians. And we have like a minimum wage here. Just socially, you don't pay people less than a certain amount, and that really is it's either you come over, you get free food to someone's house, or you go to a rehearsal space and you get your pay, and that's really a nice little thing about the Tampa scene. But yeah, most of those art projects just really aren't happening. Right now I'm trying to do some kind of art project work remotely, but that's a little bit tough too, because the art project thing is really trying to figure out the composer or the band's intention of the music and trying to bring that out, and doing that remotely, it's a little bit challenging. It's not impossible, don't get me wrong, but it's a little bit challenging. And honestly, it's a very interesting problem. It's how do you read the intention of a song from the sheet music and the demo recording? If there is even a demo recording, how do you just figure out what the emotion and the shape of a song is? So that's been a really interesting challenge that I've really enjoyed, I'd say, very much, is bringing that aspect out. And, and arranging some songs for some friends is really cool too. So I'll just, hey man, you got a tune? All right, send it my way. Let me arrange that for 3 horns. And you get that camaraderie. And really, this is an interesting time to build some very, strong bonds between friends in this town, and also some really strong connections. But at the same time, there's also the other side of things where, there's on Facebook, and that's primarily where the Tampa jazz scene musicians kind of communicate, for better or for worse. You're seeing a lot of weird conspiracy theories from time to time, which is a little off-putting, and there are consequences to that. And some people you don't want to work with anymore, and some people you do, and because you like the way they handled a troll on a particular post, or someone who you really like the way they tried to educate someone instead of putting them down, or you like the way that they put someone down because of their repeated harassment of someone else for wearing masks or something like that. There's just all these different factors that you wouldn't even expect would play into it, but we're seeing that a little bit here as well. I'm seeing a couple people emerge out of the woodwork to spew conspiracy theories. But, aside from that, things are, we're basically in an early summer drought here.
And how is the current situation concerning the lockdown?
Yeah, so Tampa's weird because I think technically the lockdown's over, but socially it's not. So there's not really many gigs happening for most people. And, if you really take a gig right now, you're looked at a little bit strange. It's like, why would you put yourself in that position? Because, we're playing playing music is a very physical craft, and you're breathing hard. It's like, it's strange. And, there's a lot of fluids involved, spit and airflow and mucus. It's a really gross. Playing music is very gross. I think overall we can all agree. So there's not really any gigs right now. So yeah, right now my intention was to transition more to my own music overall anyway. So this is a perfect opportunity for that. So I've been working on some new music, some big band stuff and some small group stuff, and have started doing some workshop recordings since we can't really workshop songs in person right now. So yeah, I've been writing new music a lot. I've been working on some teaching material since I'm also a teacher at Eckerd College. And I've been really trying to figure out what comes next, as most of us are. Because the odds of things going back to normal, and I mean, even the point of things going back to normal, things are supposed to keep pushing forward. Do we want to play club dates all the time? Do we want to play the same standards all the time? Those are questions I wrestle with a lot. So I'm trying to figure out, for me, career-wise, what trajectory I'm looking to have so I can have a clearer vision. What I'm seeing in my head as of now is I'd like to have my quintet being able to play festivals and concerts around the world and really showcasing that a lot more people like jazz than they think like jazz. Like jazz has I think for normal non-jazz musicians, like the average non-jazz musician, they think of jazz, they think of Kenny G, or they think of, Najee, or they think of, just some smooth music. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, even though that I'd say is more instrumental pop. Some of it is cross genre there, where instrumental pop versus jazz. I'm really looking to see if I can get more people to like jazz from oh yeah, that's jazz, I'm into that. It depends what kind, but I'm into it. As most people would honestly like it. People like jazz. It's such a broad genre. That's like saying people like, pop music. People don't like pop music. Well, pop music is literally popular music. Everybody likes popular music because popular music is such a broad genre. There's so much in there, or, it's just, so right now I've been just really just hunkering down and writing and practicing a bit, not as much as I'd like, because there's a weird thing about writing and practicing, and I'm sure other multi-instrumentalists can relate to this. You feel like you neglect one when you give time to the other, although both are kind of fulfilling in a really important way. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that right now, there isn't really much to do. I'm doing some remote recording stuff for other people as well, and I've been doing some associate producer work as well. So I've been helping Maria Schneider with her upcoming project, Data Lords, which, by the way, everybody should buy on Artist Share. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I've been helping her with some mixing and mastering, and the track order on the first CD was my idea, which is something kind of cool. Well, it's mostly, I changed one track, and it balanced things out. We were debating it. We went with my final order, which was a pretty exciting thing for me, given that I'm a huge, longtime fan of Maria's. Yeah, so overall, I think probably everybody has the same story. You're just working on your craft a bit, working on the business side of things, making sure your website's up to date, making sure you have all the press stuff, all the copy work, all your sheet music, all the vertical integration, all of your tunes are registered with your performing rights organization. You have all of your records are kept on what tunes you've performed of yours and submitted and what you haven't submitted. And then just writing new music. I'd be surprised if most musicians weren't kind of in the same boat. From time to time, I also take on other projects. I'll do some commissions where I'll do some transcription projects or even copywork projects where I'll take someone's music and really work on the copywork aspect, which I was really fortunate, as Maria basically taught me copywork. And there's such a psychological art to copywork. People completely overlook how the physical sheet music impacts the performance of the music. It's striking how impactful and important it is. But yeah, so the normal stuff, I guess, that everybody else is doing.
I'm not doing half of the things that you're doing, and I'm feeling already quite busy. But I agree with you totally. It's an excellent opportunity for organizing the to-do list, at least organizing it. And what about the track you've selected for us?
So the piece you're going to hear is called Midnight Run. It's a small group version of a tune that I originally conceived for small group, but actually wrote for big band. The tune was really dark, and then I moved it up a half step and wrote it with like a West African groove, because I was really into West African music at the time, for big band, and that came out really interestingly, especially since it had some really interesting, very strange time signature motion. But then I moved it back down to the original key and let one of my drummer friends kind of just compose a drum groove over this, and he came up with something really interesting. So this particular recording is I think it's pretty much a fixed form. When we play it live, we have one open section, and that's for the tenor solo, but it's over a vamp. And then there's a lot more, I guess, more big bandy kind of things in here. So there's a whole section that's almost like a build-up section, which is I think it's, what is it? It's 2 8-bar repeated sections, and it's about here in tempo. So it's has this really interesting guitar part that I actually had to get my guitar player friend LaRue to actually approve, because it was really challenging. It's all over the instrument. It's almost like an arpeggiation of chords, and that's actually how I discovered the idea. This is how I work. Sometimes I export a song from Finale, which is what I use primarily, to GarageBand, and then I'll just play with different sounds. So I turn on a Japanese arpeggiator, and I freaked out because I really liked the way the harmony worked in that, or the voice. I usually write all my voicings for piano out. So I wrote out all these voicings, and the arpeggiator played through them, and it created this really interesting line. So I transcribed that line, and that became the foundation for the guitar part. I try and make sure that I can sing every line of every part that I write. So, singing is really challenging. It took quite a while, so I had to make it a little bit more logical because it really jumps all over the place. But what I hope you hear in this piece is something that's really melodically strong, and it's interesting. It's actually one of my shorter tunes, too. Usually my tunes are 7 minutes. I find that, just weirdly enough, whenever I perform a tune, it's almost always 7 minutes long live. But this one's 6 minutes, and it feels complete to me. It actually started as part of a suite as well. So toward the end of the tune, right toward the outro, you'll hear this. You'll hear that kind of line, and that actually comes from another movement in the suite. This was supposed to close this off. I think it was called the Catharsis Suite. Yeah, that's right, the Catharsis Suite. Yeah, I wrote this around the same time as I wrote the Emotional Suite, and I was really into the emotional concept at the time. And so hopefully you enjoy this. The time signature motion is very, very irregular, but hopefully you don't really hear it that much. That was the goal. It was to make it so that it is very fluid, very melody driven, even through drum motion and bass motion and voicings in the piano. And really the only voicings I didn't write out were during the tenor solo section, or really any of the solo sections, but most of the voicings are written out, which I find to be an interesting thing because it gives me a little extra fine-tuned control. So this is me on saxophone, LaRue Nicholson on guitar, my friend Andrew Allen helping out with the piano on this, Alejandro Arenas on bass, and Alex DeLeon on drums.
Well, thank you, Zach, for your participation. Really enjoyed the talk. Thank you very much. And thank you, dear listener, for staying with us. This was the 18th episode of QuaranJazz. I'm Geisa Fernandes, singer-songwriter and music researcher from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And if you'd like to make comments, suggestions, or tell your stories here in QuaranJazz, drop me a line. You can find the link to my webpage and the link to my mailing list in the description of this episode. I've also created a group on Facebook. The name is the Touring Jazz Musician. Well, I've created this group after writing a guide on jazz festivals that accept material directly from artists. So if you're a jazz musician with no manager and would like to know more about the jazz festival scenario, look for the Touring Jazz Musician on Facebook and join the discussion. Thank you again for staying with us. Till next week. And now, ladies and gents, Midnight Run. QuaranJazz. Listen while you're home. QuaranJazz, a podcast by Geisa Fernandes.